You've done it. Maybe quietly when no one was watching. You walked past your plant and said something. Good morning, how are you doing? Look at this new leaf. You might have felt slightly ridiculous immediately afterward. You shouldn't have. Because the phenomenon you were intuitively responding to, the sense that talking to your plant does something, turns out to be supported by a body of research that is more rigorous, more mechanistic, and more surprising than anyone expected when the question was first taken seriously. Plants grow faster when exposed to sound. That much is now documented fact. But the why is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Because the mechanism has nothing to do with intention or emotion or any mystical connection between speaker and listener. It's physics, converted into chemistry, converted into biology. And the specifics of that conversion reveal something extraordinary about how your plant perceives and responds to the physical world. Let me take you through it from the beginning. From the first experiments to what we now understand about the molecular machinery inside your plant's cells that responds to the sound of your voice. The idea that sound affects plant growth is not new. In the 1960s and 70s, a wave of experiments, some rigorous, many not, claimed that plants grew better with music. These experiments were largely dismissed by the mainstream scientific community as methodologically flawed. The variables weren't controlled, the measurements weren't standardized, the conclusions were overclaimed. And then, starting in the early 2000s, a new generation of researchers went back to the question with better tools, better controls, better measurement, and the results were harder to dismiss. A 2007 study published in the Journal of the Korean Society for Horticultural Science by researchers at Seoul National University exposed rice plants to specific auditory stimuli, pure tones at controlled frequencies and amplitudes, in otherwise identical growth conditions. The plants exposed to sound showed significantly higher germination rates, increased shoot elongation, and earlier maturity than silent controls. The researchers identified 13 genes that showed altered expression in response to the sound treatment. This wasn't music making plants happy. This was a specific physical stimulus, sound waves, altering gene expression. That's a different claim entirely, and it's one with a plausible, testable mechanism. In 2014, a study published in Trends in Plant Science by a team at the University of Florence proposed the central hypothesis that now organizes this field. They called it Phytoacoustics, the systematic study of plant responses to acoustic stimuli, and they argued that plants possess mechanosensitive cellular machinery that responds to the physical pressure variations of sound waves in much the same way that it responds to touch, wind, and gravity. The key is this: sound is mechanical energy. It propagates as alternating pressure waves through air, water, and solid materials. And those pressure waves, when they reach a plant cell, create minute deformations of the cell membrane and cell wall. Deformations that activate the same mechanosensitive ion channels that respond to touch and wind. Your voice, in other words, touches your plant. Not directly, acoustically. It creates pressure waves that physically deform plant cell membranes in a way that the plant's cellular machinery detects and responds to. And the response is not trivial. A 2015 study published in Plant Signaling and Behavior by researchers at the University of Western Australia confirmed that sound exposure at frequencies between 100 and 500 Hz, which is the frequency range of human speech, spanning from a low male voice to a moderate female voice, triggered significant calcium ion influx in plant cells within minutes of exposure. Calcium, as we've discussed in this series, is the plant's primary intracellular signaling molecule. It's the molecular messenger that initiates and coordinates responses across tissues. Human speech, the specific frequency range of your voice when you talk to your plant, is within the window most effective at triggering this calcium cascade. Not because your plant understands what you're saying, because your voice generates the precise range of physical pressure variations that the plant's mechanosensitive machinery is tuned to detect. And what the calcium cascade triggers is growth-related. A 2019 study from the South Korean Rural Development Administration exposed tomato plants to recorded human speech for 1 hour per day over 4 weeks. The speech-treated plants showed 21% higher growth rates, 37% higher chlorophyll concentration, and significantly elevated expression of genes associated with cell elongation, cell wall synthesis, and nutrient uptake compared to silent controls. 21% from sound alone, from the physical pressure variations generated by a human voice. The researchers identified specific transcription factors, molecular switches that control gene expression, that were upregulated by sound exposure. Among them, genes in the gibberellin signaling pathway. Gibberellins are the primary hormones responsible for stem elongation and cell division in plants. Sound exposure appears to activate the molecular machinery that promotes growth at a fundamental genetic level. But here's where it gets more specific and more interesting, because it's not just any sound. The frequency matters, the amplitude matters, and the data shows something that should make you think twice about what you're saying when you talk to your plant. A 2017 study published in PLOS 1 by researchers at Chungang University in South Korea compared plant growth responses to different audio stimuli: white noise, music at varying tempos, and human speech at equivalent decibel levels. Human speech produced the strongest growth response, stronger than music, stronger than white noise at the same volume. The researchers proposed that the specific acoustic properties of human speech, the modulation, the harmonic complexity, the pattern of frequency variation, produce a more varied and sustained mechanosensitive stimulus than steady-state tones or noise. Your voice, in its natural cadence and variation, is more mechanically stimulating to plant cells than a steady sound at the same volume. You are a particularly effective acoustic stimulus, not because of the content of what you say, because of the physical properties of how you say it. And there's one more dimension to this that I think is the most personally meaningful part of this entire topic, because it connects acoustic stimulation to something that changes based on what you're talking about. Based on what you're feeling when you speak, your vocal characteristics change with your emotional state. Stress, sadness, excitement, calm. Each produces measurable differences in speaking rate, pitch variation, harmonic content, and amplitude envelope. A 2016 study published in Speech Communication by researchers at the University of Geneva documented these variations across emotional states with high consistency across speakers and cultures. And because the plant's response is to the physical properties of sound, not the semantic content, plants exposed to different emotional vocal states are technically being exposed to physically different acoustic stimuli. A calm, even warm voice speaking quietly, like someone describing something they love, produces a different frequency and amplitude profile than a stressed, agitated, rapid voice. And those differences translate into different mechanosensitive stimulation patterns at the cell membrane level. We don't have a study that directly maps calm human voice versus stressed human voice to differential plant growth outcomes. That study hasn't been published yet, as of the time this was written. But the chain of evidence, from emotional state to vocal properties to acoustic characteristics to plant mechanosensitive response, is complete enough to take seriously. What you say to your plant might matter less than how you sound when you say it. Now let me address the dimension of this topic that most plant science videos stop before reaching. The question isn't just, does sound affect plants? We've established that it does. The question is what this tells us about the nature of plants as sensory organisms. A 2020 review and annual review of plant biology surveyed the evidence for mechanosensitive perception across all categories: touch, wind, gravity, and sound, and concluded that plants possess what the authors called acoustic ecology, a set of adaptive responses to the mechanical properties of their acoustic environment that presumably evolved because sound carries reliable information about environmental conditions. Rain sounds before rainfall, wind sounds before storms, insect sounds before herbivory. Your voice is introducing new information into that acoustic ecology, not information in the linguistic sense. Mechanical information, pattern information. The complex, variable, harmonically rich stimulus of human speech is a genuinely novel signal in a plant's evolutionary environment. And the data says your plant's mechanosensitive systems are responding to it, actively, measurably, biologically. So yes, talking to your plant does something, not because the plant understands you, because your voice physically touches it, because that touch activates calcium signaling cascades that trigger gene expression changes that include growth-related transcription factors. Because the frequency range of human speech falls precisely within the window most effective at triggering mechanosensitive ion channels in plant cells. You are a sound source. Your plant is a mechanosensitive system. When those two things share a room, something happens. And the next time you walk past your plant and say something, Good morning, you're looking good today. I haven't been giving you enough water. Don't feel ridiculous. You're not talking to a houseplant. You're providing a mechanical stimulus that your plant's cells are built to detect, respond to, and grow from. The ridiculousness was never in talking to them. It was in thinking that talking couldn't matter. If this changed how you think about what your voice does in a room full of plants, subscribe. Because in the next video, we're going to talk about the opposite. 8 mistakes that make your plant lose trust in you. And number 4 is something almost